Well, good morning, everyone. We were supposed to post a completely different video today. We had it filmed, we were ready to go, and then we woke up, checked the news, and guess what? Donald Trump had set another part of the world on fire.
Yeah, the plan was a normal upload. Then overnight, the United States bombed Caracas and kidnapped Venezuela's president and his wife. So the regularly scheduled program is going to have to wait till tomorrow.
Because, well, everybody else was watching the finale of Stranger Things, the US just bombed a capital city and dragged a head of state onto a plane.
And if you're watching in Canada and thinking, okay, well, that's awful, but this is between the US and Venezuela, that's exactly how we get blindsided. Because this isn't just about Caracas. This is about the way Trump thinks he can treat any country that has something he wants. And that includes Canada.
Trump ordered strikes across Venezuela, hit targets in and around the capital, and then had Nicolas Maduro and his wife thrown on a plane like a mob arrest.
And if you're watching in Canada and thinking, well, yeah, Maduro's a dictator, he's awful, and this is just between them. Well, that is exactly how you get caught off guard. This isn't about saving democracy. This is about power, oil, and a story that Trump can reuse on any country he wants, including us.
So let's rewind a little bit. This didn't start last night. It started months ago when the US began that so called anti drug campaign at sea.
Remember all those drug boats that we talked about in our last video? You can check it out in the links below. The U.S. admitted to more than 30 strikes on suspected traffickers in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. We are talking over 100 people killed. There were a couple of survivors in custody, but no serious public accounting of who those people were. Just a growing map of explosions on the water.
Yeah, and human rights groups have already said that some of those attacks may be war crimes. And instead of stopping to prove their case, Washington escalated. From boats to tankers, from tankers to the Venezuelan coast, and now to Caracas itself, with late night strikes and a president disappearing into an American aircraft.
Congress wasn't asked in advance. They were briefed after the fact. The White House is hiding behind emergency powers and a big story about narco-terrorism. Venezuelan officials are on television saying their capital was hit, both military and civilian areas, and they're demanding proof of life from their own head of state.
So let's hold two thoughts at once, because grown adults can manage that. One, Maduro is a dictator. He has overseen a collapse of his country, jailed opponents, and there are serious allegations of killings by his own security forces. Two, that does not give the United States a blank check to bomb a capital city and abduct a leader without a declaration of war, without the UN, and without a direct attack on the United States.
Yeah, we don't like your government is not a legal basis for regime decapitation. If it was, half of the planet would be at war.
And here's why Canadians need to care now, not 6 news cycles from now. This didn't just appear out of thin air. Trump and his team have been building this story for months, and they've already started using the same tricks on us.
From the moment Trump got back in office, he stopped talking about Canada as an ally and started talking about us as a problem. Not the country that stood with them through wars and trade deals and had their back. Instead, he said we had a pipeline of fentanyl terrorists and illegals.
And on the drug side, he keeps telling Americans that Canada is letting fentanyl flood across the northern border. The actual seizures tied to Canada are tiny, under 45 pounds in a year. That doesn't make the overdose crisis any less real, of course. It just tells you the story he's selling isn't about facts.
And the same with security. He's accused Canada of letting terrorists and undocumented immigrants stroll right through the U.S., as if Canada and the U.S. border is some open back lane. You know what? It isn't. It's one of the most tightly secured and managed borders on Earth. Our agencies talk to each other every day. We screen travelers, we share information, and this is decades of practice and working together.
But obviously, facts aren't the point. The point is the story. You pick a neighbor, you paint them as reckless or weak or dishonest, and then when you want tariffs or sanctions or some emergency measure, you point back to the story and say, see, we had no choice.
And this is where it all loops back to Venezuela. First, there was the giant bounty on Maduro's head, and all the old indictments repackaged as breaking news. Then the speeches about Venezuela as a cartel state and a pipeline of cocaine and gangs and chaos.
Then came that lovely little doctrine they published in their national security strategy. the one we broke down in a previous video, and you can watch those in the links in the description. The idea that the Western Hemisphere has to be under American control politically, economically, commercially, and militarily. And the part that spells out that the US military can be used to secure access to energy and mineral resources. They didn't even tuck that away in the fine print.
Put it together with the strikes at sea, the pressure on tankers, and now the bombing of the Capitol and the kidnapping of the president, and you don't have a one-off. You have a test run for what's next.
So let's look at the steps. Venezuela was branded a narco-terror state. Then came the seizures, the hits on boats, and the heat on oil tankers, and now the bombs and the abduction. Canada has been branded as the country that lets fentanyl and terrorists slip into the US. Does anyone seriously think that that story ends up with a couple of angry posts?
And here's the part that nobody with resources can afford to ignore. Any country that has oil, minerals, or key infrastructure, just watch the world's biggest military power bomb a capital, snatch a head of state, and sell it as, oh, it's just business.
Venezuela has enormous oil reserves and critical minerals. It sits in a place that matters for shipping and regional power. That alone makes it a target. This time, the excuse was drugs and gangs and a dictator who wouldn't leave.
Canada, surprise, has critical minerals for electric vehicles, one of the biggest supplies of heavy crude on the planet, huge freshwater reserves, and a territory in the Arctic that's getting more important every day. On top of that, we're woven right into the U.S. supply chains.
Now, Mexico has oil and manufacturing. Brazil has massive mineral and agricultural wealth. This whole hemisphere is full of countries that have what Washington wants and, in Trump's mind, don't fully deserve unless they obey his demands.
When you publish a doctrine that says we control this hemisphere and we'll use our military to secure access to resources, you're not talking about one bad guy in one palace. You're laying the track for a whole series of economic and military moves.
Which is exactly why Canada cannot shrug and say, Caracas is far away and Maduro is awful, so who cares how it happened? We should care, because once this becomes normal there, it gets a lot easier to justify everywhere. And while he's bombing Caracas in the name of law and order, look who he rolls out the red carpet for, right? Vladimir Putin under an international arrest warrant for war crimes in Ukraine. Benjamin Netanyahu under his own warrant over Gaza, still welcome for high-profile visits in Alaska and photo ops at Mar-a-Lago.
So the message is pretty simple. If you're useful to Trump, you get a handshake. If you're not, you get missiles. And this isn't about law. This is about power and who he thinks he can use or punish. So Trump's messages will bomb your cities and drag your leaders away if you don't line up with our interests. No matter how bad Maduro was, the families under the rubbles are not going to feel comfortable just because the flag on the warhead has changed.
You don't get moral immunity just because your press conference comes with a podium and a logo. If you decide that you can bomb your way into a government that you prefer, you're walking down a road you used to swear that you'd never tolerate. And every country, including Canada, has to ask a simple question. If this is acceptable in Caracas today, what keeps it from being necessary somewhere else tomorrow? So what do we do about it? We're not the US. We can't click our fingers and move carrier groups around.
No, but we can control our own story. First, our government needs to stop being timid when Trump lies about Canada. Every time he claims we're flooding his country with fentanyl, Ottawa should be out there with numbers and experts and allies saying, no, this is false. And not once, but all the time.
Same on security. When he paints us as the weak link, we should be reminding Americans that this border has been a joint project for generations. If you get on a plane to the US from a Canadian airport, you pass through US pre-clearance on Canadian soil. That's how integrated this system is. We're not the problem. We're part of the solution.
We also need to be the country in the room saying Maduro is a dictator and what you did is still illegal. Those two sentences can live together. You can push for justice and still say you don't get to just bomb a capital and grab a leader because you're impatient.
And we need allies. Latin American democracies who see this as a warning shot for them. European partners who still care about international law. Asian economies that depend on stable shipping routes and don't want unilateral adventurism spreading through the hemisphere.
Canada can't fix this alone, but we can absolutely refuse to nod along while someone rewrites the rules and pretends that this is normal.
Now, before we wrap up today, there's one more uncomfortable piece that we wanted to cover, and this one's a little closer to home.
Yeah, to the Alberta and Quebec separatists, this is for you.
Yeah, when you go online and scream that Canada is a failed state, that Ottawa is abusive, that your province needs to break away and cut its own deals, you're not shouting into a void. You're broadcasting to every foreign government that would love to use that chaos.
And do you think Trump's team isn't watching those messages? They absolutely are, and they're using them. They look at that and see it as an opening. Look, Canada's falling apart. Maybe they need our help to secure their resources or defend their rights.
They will have no problem saying, we're just supporting Alberta or we're standing with Quebec's right to decide, if it lets them wedge their way into our politics and our resource decisions.
Argue all you want about equalization or pipelines or language laws. That's politics in a country. But when you start cheering for the breakup of a country at the exact moment a U.S. president is writing doctrines about controlling this entire hemisphere and using his military to secure resources, you're not scoring points against Ottawa. You're doing the free research for people who think they're entitled to what's under our feet. That's why we can't brush this off as one more crisis in a far-off place. This is a warning shot to any country with something that Washington wants. If they can create a story about drugs and gangs to justify airstrikes there, they can create a story about fentanyl and terrorists to justify economic punishment here.
So no, we don't panic, but we also don't lie to ourselves. We stay united, we push our leaders to challenge the lies, not politely swallow them. We remind the world that Canada is not a threat in this relationship. We're not the source of the drug crisis. We're not the weak border. We're not the mooch in this friendship.
We are the country that took in Venezuelan refugees when Maduro crushed his own people. We are the country that still believes treaties should mean something. We are the country that knows what happens when you let bullies rewrite the rules.
If we don't control our own story, someone like Donald Trump will happily write one for us. And in his version, Canada is always irresponsible, always ungrateful, and always in the need of a lesson.
All right, we'll leave it there for now, and we want to hear from you what you think about all this.
Yeah, if this helped make sense of what just happened in Venezuela and what it means for Canada, do the usual YouTube thing so this doesn't disappear into the algorithm swamp. Hit like, subscribe, and share it with that one friend who still thinks this is just about drugs.
If you want more than just a YouTube surface, we break this stuff down in writing over on Substack. It's at The Planet Democracy, and that's where we can go deeper, pull in sources, and talk strategy without a countdown clock.
And if you want to support this work directly, join our A-team here on YouTube. It's really appreciated, and it helps keep this channel going and keep it independent.
Thanks for supporting us, thanks for watching, and Happy New Year, everybody. Sorry it started out this way.
Ciao for now. We'll see you tomorrow.